I used to think happiness was a distant dream, something that always slipped away just when I thought I could touch it. At 35, Emily Carter, finally stood in front of a small wooden cabin by Lake Tahoe, whispering to my trembling heart, "Here it is, my home, my new life." After 14 years grinding in Silicon Valley, living in cramped apartments, breathing the suffocating air of deadlines and endless meetings, I was exhausted. High salary? Sure. Professional success? That too. But for so long, I felt like a moth chasing the light of work, forgetting the gentle glow of freedom and peace. I saved every penny, tightened my budget every evening, canceled every vacation, all for one dream: to live where the wind and water were my only companions. And then, that dream came true. A 3-bedroom wooden cabin with a rustic brown shingle roof, nestled among ancient pines, facing the vast lake. In the mornings, sunlight streamed through the large windows, reflecting off the water like molten silver. At night, the hum of insects blended with the earthy scent of pine, making my heart feel lighter than it ever had. That first week, I woke up every morning with a smile. I walked barefoot on the cool wooden floors, flung open the windows, and breathed in the misty lake air. In the small kitchen, I brewed coffee, setting the mug on a wooden table still rough with saw marks. I hadn't unpacked everything, cardboard boxes still cluttered the hallway, but that didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was, I was finally here, in my own space, untouchable, undisturbed. Or so I thought. That afternoon, as I was cleaning the living room, my phone rang. I hesitated, because the name on the screen was one I'd never dared to ignore: Victoria Carter, my older sister. I answered. Her voice came through, cold, commanding, without a hint of a greeting. "Emily, we're on our way to your place, 12 of us. Prep beds, blankets, food. We'll stay a few weeks, 3 hours out." I froze. I hadn't even set up my own bed, let alone prepared for a dozen people. My mind raced. 12 people. A few weeks. Prep. It was as if she'd announced a business itinerary, not an invasion of my private life. "Sis," I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "What did you say?" "You heard me," Victoria replied curtly, her tone like an order. "Me and my friends are driving up from LA. We want to enjoy the fresh air. Sisters help each other, right? You've got that big house, it'd be a waste to leave it empty. Get ready." Get ready. 4 words, but they hit like a dozen punches to my chest. The cold beep of the call ending cut through. Victoria had hung up, leaving me no chance to respond. I stood motionless in the living room. Boxes were scattered around me. Paintings I meant to hang leaned against the walls. I hadn't even fully savored my joy when her voice, her attitude came crashing back. My sister, as always, issuing commands, assuming I'd bow and agree. Memories flooded in, layer upon layer, like unhealed scars. At 23, Victoria borrowed money for rent, promising to pay me back, but never did. At 27, I worked overtime for 3 months to fund her lavish wedding. At 30, I drained my meager savings to pay her daughter's tuition because she said, "You've got money, I don't." It was always the same exhausting cycle. She demanded, I provided, and she forgot I was a person who deserved respect. But this time was different. This wasn't just a few $1,000s or sleepless weeks. This was my home, the sanctuary I'd spent my life reaching for. And she was about to turn it into a hotel for her friends. I sank into the new armchair, my hands trembling. Outside, Lake Tahoe lay still, reflecting the crimson sunset. The peaceful scene clashed with the chaos raging in my chest. I could hear my heart pounding, like war drums signaling an impending battle. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. In the cool air, I whispered, "No, this time it's different. This time, I won't let her take it." I don't know where that strength came from, only that it flared up fiercely, like a fire I'd kept hidden too long. And I realized that fateful call wasn't just an invasion of my privacy, it was a wake-up call. Either I stand up for my life, or I'd forever live in my sister's shadow. I opened my eyes, looking around the house still smelling of fresh wood. In that moment, I felt it clearly. This was where I'd redraw my life or lose it again. Maybe you felt it too, that moment when something you've waited for, cherished, is suddenly taken for granted by someone else. When the people you love most become the ones who hurt you deepest, would you endure or stand up? If you've ever wrestled between love and self-respect, let me know in the comments. My story might be yours too. And trust me, things are about to get much more dramatic. Have you ever felt like a walking wallet? Someone only remembered when others need money or help? I lived that way for over a decade, and the person who pulled me into that cycle was my sister, Victoria. We grew up in a middle-class family in Los Angeles. Our parents worked hard, raising us with simple principles. Work hard, be honest, love each other. I took those words to heart. Victoria, it seems, did not. From childhood, she was used to being favored. I remember at 16, I saved up a month's worth of part-time job money to buy a winter coat. The day I wore it to school, Victoria saw it, smirked, and said, "Nice. Let me borrow it for a few days." I nodded, thinking she'd return it. That coat never made it back to my closet. That was the first time I learned that to her, borrow meant keep. And when I graduated college and started working as a software engineer, Victoria was struggling with rent debt. One evening she called, sobbing, If I don't pay rent this week, we'll be evicted. You care about your niece, right? Help me, just this once." I just started working, my first paycheck barely warm in my pocket, but I sent her every cent I had saved. I thought, family comes first, she'll pay me back. Of course, that promise never materialized. At 27, Victoria got married. I still remember that afternoon in a cafe, her gripping my hand, eyes teary. "Emily, I want a wedding to remember. It's once in a lifetime, but we're short on cash. You'll help, right?" I was working 14-hour days to pay off student loans. But seeing her hopeful eyes, I nodded. I drained nearly all my savings so she could have a fancy venue, imported European flowers, and a pristine white dress that cost twice my monthly salary. That day, she glowed like a princess. I stood in the corner, smiling, my heart heavy. Then, when her daughter entered high school, tuition became a burden. Victoria called, her voice familiar with the assumption I'd agree. "You make more than me. You wouldn't let your niece go to public school when she deserves a better private one, would you?" Once again, I sent money. I told myself, I'm single, I don't have many expenses, it's for family. But those just this once moments became an endless chain. Meanwhile, Victoria spent on designer bags, weekend spa trips, and beach resort check-ins. I saw her glamorous photos on social media while I ate instant noodles to get by, just to cover the bills she left behind. The unfairness carved deeper into me over time, but instead of saying no, I soothed myself. She's my sister, my blood. I have to sacrifice. Some nights, I'd come home from work at 11 p.m., hands aching from typing. I'd collapse on the floor of my tiny apartment, tears streaming. Meanwhile, I knew Victoria was somewhere clinking wine glasses at a lavish party. The contrast stabbed like a knife. The worst part wasn't the lost money. It was feeling I only mattered when I gave. I never heard, "Are you okay?" or "Are you tired?" Just one question, "Can you help me?" Over time, the wounds piled up. I kept working myself to the bone, kept enduring. But deep inside, another voice grew. "Enough, you deserve your own happiness." The turning point came at 34, when I was nearly burned out from relentless projects at work. One evening, I opened my laptop, looked at my bank balance, pitiful compared to my efforts. I told myself, if I keep going like this, I'll spend my life funding other people's dreams. That night, I wrote a promise in my journal. One day, I'll buy a home for myself. And from the moment I stepped through that door, I'll never let anyone take that peace away. That promise became my drive, my flame through the toughest days. And when I stood in front of the Tahoe cabin a week ago, I knew I'd kept that vow to myself. But Victoria's call, brazen and entitled, struck like a blade. It dredged up every memory of being used, reminding me that if I didn't stand up now, I'd fall back into the old cycle. I clenched my fists, eyes on the shimmering lake. A thunderous voice rose in me. "No, not this time. This is my place. This is my final line." I've shared the years I lived in an endless cycle of sacrifice, from my 20s to my mid-30s. Now, with my dream home in hand, I faced a challenge, protecting it from my own sister. If you find this story compelling and want to know how I faced the convoy of my sister's friends, comment why. If you think it's just a familiar tale not worth caring about, comment N. Have you ever seen the place you love most turned into a chaotic stage? I have. And that day, that image, will forever be etched in my memory like a vivid nightmare. Just 3 hours after that brief call, the peace of my Tahoe cabin was shattered. From afar, I heard engines roaring through the pines, growing closer, like war drums signaling an advancing army. My heart raced, my hands gripping the window frame. I knew the storm had arrived. Then they appeared, a convoy of 5 vehicles. Victoria's familiar black SUV led the way, followed by sedans stuffed with people and a pickup loaded with suitcases, beer coolers, folding chairs, and barbecue gear. It looked like a carefree tour group, except their destination wasn't a hotel. It was my home. The crunch of tires on gravel filled the yard, doors slammed, laughter roared, kids shrieked, blending into a chaos that shattered the lake's calm. I felt like a soldier guarding a fortress about to be overrun. The front door hadn't even opened when the pounding began. Before I could respond, Victoria shoved it open, striding in as if she owned the place. Her floral dress fluttered, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, a triumphant smile on her face. She entered like a queen reclaiming her domain. "Emily!" Her voice echoed through the hall, a declaration of ownership. "You're so lucky, this place is amazing." She spun around, arms outstretched, as if presenting my home to an imaginary TV audience. Behind her, people poured in. They laughed loudly, dropped suitcases on the rug, popped open beer cans, the hiss and clink of toasts filling my pristine living room. I stared, stunned. The smell of beer mixed with fresh wood, muddy shoe prints stained the light floors. Each mark a stab to my heart. All my care, my cherished dreams were suddenly a dance floor for strangers. A man I'd never met, hair slick with gel, laughed loudly. "God, this kitchen's huge. We're gonna cook up a feast." A young woman snapped selfies, leaving wet footprints on the wood. 2 kids ran down the hall yelling, "Where's the lake? Where's the lake?" Everything spiraled out of control so fast I could barely breathe. I fought the trembling in my body and spoke. "Excuse me, everyone, this isn't a hotel, you can't just—" But no one listened. Laughter drowned me out, and Victoria waved me off like a nagging server. She marched upstairs, her heels clacking on the wood like hammer blows to my head. "Sweetie, the master bedroom's on the second floor, right?" she asked, not waiting for an answer. "I'll take that one. It's got the lake view, perfect for my morning yoga." I shot up, heart pounding as if it might burst. I rushed to block the stairs, my voice cracking. "No, Victoria, that's my private room. No one's allowed in there." She stopped, raised an eyebrow over her sunglasses, a cold smile curling her lips. "Come on, don't be selfish. Your house is huge. Why begrudge me one room? You've got others." Her friends chimed in. "Yeah, let the guests have the big room. Good hosts make sacrifices." I wanted to scream that they weren't guests. They were intruders. But my throat locked up. For years, I'd swallowed my anger to keep the peace. Only this time, there was no peace left. Victoria tossed her hair and kept climbing. In one swift move, she threw her massive suitcase onto my bed in the master bedroom. The thud echoed like a slap to my dignity. I was reeling. In a flash, the past flooded back. The times I worked overtime to pay her debts. The days I skipped meals to fund her daughter's tuition. The nights I cried from exhaustion but still nodded yes. And now, the home I'd dreamed of, she claimed without a thought. I straightened my back, summoning every ounce of strength to say words I'd never dared before. "No one gets in here. This is my space. You have no right." The room fell silent for a few seconds. The laughter outside stopped, only my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Victoria turned, removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes cold as ice. She smirked, half amused, half disdainful. "You're standing up to me?" I didn't answer. I just stood there, hands clenched until they went numb, my gaze locked on hers. In that moment, I crossed a line. From the one who always endured, I became the one who said no. The air grew thick as if the whole house was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. If you want to hear more stories and struggles like mine and feel a connection to them, you can find my previous videos on this channel. Do you know the hardest part of a confrontation isn't the shouting, but the silence between arguments? When every eye is on you, waiting to see if you'll crumble like before. That night, I found myself in that exact moment, in the master bedroom of my lakeside cabin, a place meant for peace, not a wrenching battle. Victoria stood across from me, her eyes like steel, her voice cutting. Emily, you're so petty. We're family. Mom and Dad always taught us to share. You've got this huge house. Why begrudge me one room? I wanted to laugh bitterly. Sharing in her dictionary meant I gave, and she took, but I didn't laugh. I stood there, trying to stay calm, though a storm raged inside me. Her friends started piling on, their tones dripping with sarcasm. Yeah, she's so selfish. We're guests and this is how we're treated? Shameful, not even helping her own sister. Each word was a knife to my heart. I felt small, surrounded by their noisy crowd. Part of me trembled. Was I wrong? Was I too selfish? Too harsh? The label of bad person they pinned on me made me feel suffocated for a moment. Victoria took another step, lowering her voice for the final blow. Do you want to be known as the ungrateful sister who kicked out her own flesh and blood and friends? The whole family will hear about this. Can you handle that? Yes, I was afraid of that. I'd lived my life avoiding being seen as heartless. I'd sacrificed everything to be the good sister. But when my eyes fell on her suitcase sprawled across my bed, a different feeling surged. A sense of loss, of being violated to my core. I turned, walked out to the hallway, trying to breathe and steady myself. Then it came. Crash! The sound of shattering glass, followed by raucous laughter from the living room. Someone had broken the glass vase I'd bought on my only trip to Italy, a treasure I'd cherished for years. I froze, my hands clenched, blood rushing to my head. In that moment, a voice screamed inside me, "Enough! If you don't act now, you'll lose everything." I marched to my study, locked the door behind me. The laughter and chatter still echoed, but this time, I wasn't swept away. I opened my phone, fingers trembling but steady, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? This is my house, I said, voice shaking but clear. About 12 people barged in without permission. I've asked them to leave, but they refuse. I need help. Hearing my own voice, I felt a strange strength. I was no longer the sister forced to comply. I was the owner of this home. About 15 minutes later, police sirens echoed through the pines. I opened the study door and stepped into the living room. Victoria's friends immediately looked panicked, some awkwardly gathering their things. But Victoria stood tall, her lips curled in a mocking smile. "Oh, Emily," she shook her head, voice dripping with disdain. "You really called the cops to kick out your own sister? Do you know what people will think?" The front door swung open. Two officers entered, an older man with gray hair and a young female officer with sharp eyes. The man spoke firmly. "Where's the homeowner?" I stepped forward, my voice stronger than ever. "That's me, Emily Carter. This is my house. I have the deed." I handed over the fresh paperwork. The female officer scanned the scene. Suitcases, scattered beer cans, muddy prints, shattered glass glinting under the lights. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are these people here with your permission?" she asked. "No, they showed up uninvited, and I've asked them to leave multiple times." The man nodded, turning to Victoria and her friends. "You have 15 minutes to pack up and leave. Otherwise, we'll handle this as trespassing." The living room fell silent for a few seconds, then erupted in protests. "What? We're just visiting. This is outrageous." But no one argued with the police for long. They started gathering their things, faces sour. The screech of dragging suitcases replaced their earlier raucous cheers. Victoria stood still, face flushed, hands balled into fists. She stepped closer, whispering through gritted teeth. "You'll regret this. You'll lose your whole family, Emily." I looked straight into her eyes, fearless for the first time. In my mind, I thought, if keeping family means losing myself, I'd rather lose you. But I didn't say it. I let my silence be my final answer. When the door slammed shut behind them, the house fell into a heavy stillness. I leaned against the wall, my legs weak, but a new light surged in me, a strength I didn't know I had. Do you believe a house can breathe? I do. Because a few days after that chaotic night, When the door closed behind Victoria and her friend's heavy footsteps, I heard my wooden cabin sigh in relief. It wasn't from the walls, but from the silence that enveloped it, a silence I'd fought to reclaim. That morning, early winter sunlight poured through the large windows. Lake Tahoe was veiled in thin mist, so still I could hear the soft lapping of waves on the shore. I grabbed a broom, swept up the last shards of broken glass, collected empty beer cans, and wiped away muddy shoe prints from the light wooden floors. Each swipe of the cloth felt like erasing the grime that had clung to my heart for years. The house was restored to order, but a quiet emptiness crept into me. I'd won, yes. I'd kept my home, yes, but I'd also lost something. I recalled Victoria's eyes before she left. Not just anger, not just resentment. There was a flicker of panic, as if she'd realized a familiar world was crumbling around her. I sat by the fireplace in a wooden chair, holding a steaming mug of tea. The fire crackled, but my heart felt heavy as stone. I didn't hate her, at least not like before. The anger had faded, replaced by something more complex, part pity, part sadness. Because after all, she was still my blood, someone I'd once loved deeply. I wondered, was there a way to hold my boundaries without building a wall that cut us off completely? That question lingered for days. Then, one winter afternoon, as the sunset bathed the lake in gold, I knew what to do. I had to write. I pulled out paper and a fountain pen from the desk drawer. Each word trembled, as if drawn from my heart. I began simply, "Dear Victoria." My hand moved slowly, letting emotion guide me. I wrote, "You'll always have a place in my heart, but in this house there's no room for disrespect. This is the space I spent my life building. If you ever want to visit, come with respect and sincerity. Then I'll open the door. If not, it's better we keep our distance." I set the pen down, my heart trembling with relief. I didn't write to punish her or to cling to her. I wrote to set clear boundaries, to stop myself from wavering. The letter wasn't harsh, but it wasn't yielding either. It was the culmination of everything I'd learned. True love cannot exist without respect. I folded the paper, slipped it into an envelope, wrote her LA address, and sent it certified mail. As I dropped it into the small-town postbox, it felt like I was sending away a piece of my past, a piece of the weight that had pressed on my heart for years. Back home, I sat on the porch, gazing at the lake's shimmering surface. The pine-scented breeze cooled my face. For the first time, I saw the difference between cutting someone off and setting boundaries. I hadn't erased Victoria from my life. I'd only said, "If you want to be in my life, you have to play fair." As night fell, I lit candles by the window, the room glowing with soft golden light. A new peace opened in me. No more fear, no more guilt, just resolve. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Victoria might lash out, might try to retaliate, might even rally the family against me. But at least I'd spoken my truth with as much calm and humanity as I could. In the quiet darkness, I pictured Victoria opening the letter. I didn't know how she'd react, tearing it up in rage or reading it silently, word by word. But I hoped some part of her would understand. I didn't hate her. I just wouldn't accept being disrespected anymore. That letter wasn't just for her. It was for the old me. The girl who cried silently while carrying everyone's burdens, who told herself family comes first, even as she was drained dry. Now she was different. She knew that love without boundaries was just destruction. I whispered to myself, I chose compassion, but no longer submission. Have you ever spent a Christmas completely alone? No parties, no family, no loud cheers, just you and the quiet around you? It sounds sad, but for me, that Christmas was the first time I truly felt the meaning of freedom. Snow blanketed the forest around Lake Tahoe. Pine branches sagged under heavy drifts, bowing as if welcoming winter. I stood by my cabin's window, watching snowflakes fall slowly, twirling in the wind before touching the ground. Everything was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. In the living room, a small Christmas tree I'd decorated glowed with tiny golden lights. I hung a few red ornaments, some simple ribbons. No fancy gifts sat beneath, just a small box I'd wrapped for myself, a symbol of a new beginning. On the table, a glass of red wine glinted in the candlelight. I played soft jazz, the piano's slow melody blending with the howling wind outside. Everything was simple, but I felt more at peace than ever. Honestly, I'd once feared this, being alone on Christmas. I'd imagined I'd feel lonely, cry, resent. But when the moment came, I realized loneliness wasn't as scary as being surrounded by people who only used me. Better alone than a shadow in someone else's life. I raised my glass, saying to myself, to peace, to freedom, to me. The wine touched my lips, its gentle bitterness warming me from within. My body relaxed, as if for the first time in years I was allowed to enjoy without worrying about someone demanding more. But just as I set the glass down, my phone buzzed. I frowned. Lately, most messages were accusations, missed calls laced with resentment from Victoria. I'd chosen silence, not responding. So when her name lit up the screen, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep this night perfectly quiet. But then, I tapped the screen. It wasn't a call but a text, a few short lines. I read your letter. For the first time I saw your strength. If you're okay with it, I'd like to visit, just me. I froze. The words danced before my eyes, almost unbelievable. In that moment my heart tightened, a mix of worry and hope. I remembered her panicked eyes as she was forced to leave my house. I remembered the years she took my sacrifices for granted. And I remembered myself, the sister who once trembled to say no. Now just a brief text, but I sensed a difference. No commanding tone, no entitlement. Just a request, maybe even an acknowledgement. For the first time, she recognized the boundaries I'd set. I didn't rush to reply. I set the phone down, leaned back in the chair. Emotions swirled, doubt, caution, but above all, relief. Because this victory wasn't about defeating my sister. It was about defeating my old self. I'd kept my vow. No one could take the peace of this home without respect. I smiled, a smile no longer forced. That Christmas Eve, I realized I didn't need others' validation. I'd claimed my own worth, and that was the greatest gift. Yet, deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. One text couldn't erase a long history of hurt, but it could be a start, a chance to rewrite how we see each other. And I, for the first time in years, was ready to step into the new year with hope that family could change if both sides learned respect. I stood, walked to the window. Outside, snow fell thickly. I placed my hand on the wooden frame, whispering to myself, hope, this time let it be a true beginning. The Christmas tree's light reflected on the glass, showing my small but steady silhouette. In that moment, I knew. I was no longer the girl who only endured. I was the woman who chose peace over chaos, freedom over exploitation, hope over resentment. That Christmas, I didn't just welcome a new winter, I welcomed a new life. Looking back on my story, I realized the greatest value wasn't keeping a house, but keeping peace in my soul. I learned to set boundaries because family without respect is just exploitation. I understood that compassion doesn't mean unconditional endurance. It means saying no when needed while still holding space for loved ones. Better alone and true to yourself than surrounded by relationships that drain you. That's the lesson I want to share with anyone caught in a cycle of sacrifice and hurt. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just a why to let me know you're with me. Don't forget to follow the channel for more stories, where we find strength and compassion and hope together.